Always a pleasure to talk to you. Always a pleasure to discover your new roles. This one reminded me my years in journalism and how, the first thing that they taught us was about respecting the truth. How important is that film into representing that whole job that is investigative journalism and women like Mary Mapes?
Yes, it's about, the film's set back in 2004 and deals with a very specific media scandal in America, but I think it does have universalities into all of the press, the relationship between politics, press, and big business in any country. And I think even since 2004, because of course Twitter, no one was on Twitter. It was before the Twitter sphere. And I think that whole notion of caption journalism, the headline, has become everything. And certainly in television news, a lot of it is about entertainment, infotainment, the news making money. There's a wonderful speech that Robert Redford's character Dan Rather gives about, soon we'll just be reading down the news for show. But both Dan and Mary did get into journalism for idealistic reasons and saw it as a public service. And I'm sure there are people who still feel that way, but their voices do get shouted down, I think.
Absolutely. Having met her, how far do you think she would have gone to preserve the truth, especially in the circumstances of her personal life being also included in that in a way that she didn't want to?
Yes. Well, Mary was behind the camera. She produced the piece and the pieces, and Dan rather fronted them. So for her to be thrust into the spotlight personally, I think she was entering uncharted waters. Now we sort of get used to the attacks, the personal attacks that go on the internet. It seems just like a minute-to-minute, let alone daily occurrence. Whereas that sort of playing the man rather than dealing with the facts of a story wasn't an everyday occurrence back then. So, I mean, she went as far as losing her job. She defended the story right to the end and still does. But she couldn't, at the time, she was prevented from speaking to the press, and hence she wrote the memoir on which the film is based.
I think if social media was on at the time, maybe the story would have deviated differently. That's what I was thinking.
There certainly would have been. Yeah, there would have been more opinionating. But I think it's interesting that this story about Bush's military service and the question mark over whether he served or went AWOL, that story died very quickly. But the Kerry Swiftboat attack, which ultimately led to Kerry losing the election, that story swam. And I just think it's interesting that one story sank and one swam, and why.
Yeah, no, very, very much so. For you, what's the role of cinema in all this? Obviously, this is a feature film and not a documentary, but shedding the light to a larger audience about something that might have died out in terms of a story and what scandal it was at the time.
We often think about our news as being quite faceless, and so I suppose it's putting a face for the people behind that. It's which I found really interesting, seeing how a story is put together. It's a little bit like a detective story, watching an investigative journalist try and verify the sources and follow the scent, and then see how that actual truth, quite an important story, got killed. You think about it as a bookend to All the President's Men, which of course Robert Redford was in, and they're quite different connections these journalists have to the organisations that they work for.
How important is truth to your life? Is it a value that is important to you and your family?
Oh, look, I've 4 children, and something I'm constantly saying is, that old adage, the truth will set you free. It's, a series of lies you then have to back up and keep justifying. It takes a lot of energy to tell a lie. I think the truth is often very hard to digest. The truth is often very complicated, but it's certainly worth living inside.
No, absolutely. And do you feel that it's difficult to stay true to oneself in Hollywood, or do you have to be as, accomplished and confident as yourself to know how to have a dichotomy between the two?
Well, there's many. The truth is a subjective thing, isn't it? I mean, I think it's important not to think about yourself so much, but to think about the work and to think about your audience. And so, the reason why I was interested in making this film was I thought this is a really interesting story. I'd love to know what people think about it, because I think it raises a lot of questions that don't get asked very often.
It's a matter of fact what I'm going to say, but I'm always fascinated watching you on screen. You have that screen presence that comes so far and few. Was it always an impulse for you, acting? Did you always feel like you were an actress from a very young age?
No, I always, did play acting, could try and stop me, but I'd never for a minute as a child thought it was something you could do, as an adult, as a profession. I didn't think that at all. And so I'm constantly surprised that I'm doing what I'm doing. But, that's why it's great working in the theatre is you have, you have the people right in front of you. You have a very visceral understanding of your audience, which you are slightly dislocated from, I think, when you work in film. But it's for other people.